and I am the chair of the Committee on Parent Education, why I'm in here. A few other people in the committee are here in the audience tonight, and a lot of people who have supported the program. So we, the Parent Education Committee, is running 2 programs this year. Tonight, which I truly appreciate you all coming out of your cocoons and ice caves to leaping through snow mounds and traffic to get here to listen. I think this is a fabulous program. We knew the school had suggested some topics, the adjustment counselors internally, and then we had a list of topics to pick, and one of the topics was anxiety as a theme that guidance counselors across the board thought was a worthwhile parent training. And so we did research and found Lyons, who was highly recommended, and some great information. And so that's the program you're here for tonight. But while I have you here, because you're probably my best target audience, March 31st, we will have another speaker, our final speaker. His name is Anthony Wolf. He's going to do adolescent communication is the general topic, and he's the author of 2 books, Get Out of My Life, But Would You Take Cheryl and I to the Mall? And then his other book is I'd Listen If My Parents Would Just Shut Up. So he will be probably more geared middle high school families, ideally, because I think it's fairly adolescent. March 31st, so mark the calendars out. I think the next round of communication you'll hear about is blood with that. So again, I appreciate you all coming out tonight, because I know that being out of your house for any reason is painful at this point, and it was really kind of you to come, and I hope you enjoy Lindy. We're looking forward to her training, and it's on HQ tonight, same time. So thank you, Asia. You can watch this with your friends.
That would be fun to watch it with your friends.
You never know.
So hi, everybody.
Hi.
I'm Lynn. Thanks for coming. I live in Concord, New Hampshire. We've got snow, but not like this. Boy, it's impressive. So I have a private practice in Concord, and I also do a lot of speaking around the country and a lot around New England as well. So we're going to talk about worry and anxiety, you know, woo woo, right? My favorite topic. We have a nice small group, so as I'm talking, if you have questions or if there are things that you need me to clarify, just throw up a hand, and I'm happy to sort of interrupt myself and answer your questions. Let me turn my remote on. All right, we're ready to go. So, anxiety. Anxiety is the #1 reason why people go to see a mental health professional these days, and it's also the #1 reason why people bring a child to see a mental health professional. There are 2 reasons why somebody, say your kid is worried and anxious and it's been going on for a few years, and you're sort of managing it and you're kind of keeping things where they need to be, and then suddenly you decide that, all right, as somebody emailed me today, it's time to bring out the big guns. What do you think are the things that make a child push a parent into picking up the phone and calling somebody like me? There are 2 things that I hear over and over again that are enough to sort of tip the scales toward needing professional help. So just yell it out. Not sleeping, yes, sleep. When sleep becomes an issue, because that impacts everybody. If a child's not sleeping, and that means the parents aren't sleeping. I had one little boy who decided when he was about 10 that if he couldn't fall asleep, then the whole family was going to stay up all night with him. Hi, everybody, come on in. We just started. Your timing is perfect. So, and if you're a 10-year-old boy, it's not hard to keep your whole family up all night, actually. Did it on night 2, and then night 3, I got a call from the pediatrician saying, we've got an emergency here. So that's 1, sleep, definitely. What do you think is the second thing that really gets a parent's attention? School in general. So certainly school avoidance and school refusal. But even when a parent will be sitting in a parent-teacher conference and the teacher will say, oh, well, your child is, you know, really such a bright kid, and I think that she sort of is getting the concepts, but man, she is asking me so many questions during the day, or It's really hard for her to concentrate on what we're learning because she's so distracted with whether or not mom's going to pick her up at 3:15 as promised. In fact, a lot of kids are first sort of identified because of focus and attention issues, which we know oftentimes are a result of what's going on in that busy, anxious brain. So, oh, that's interesting. Sorry, I wasn't looking and I must have been hitting the remote. Were the slides just moving randomly as I was going along? Okay, so anyway, this is a slide that was supposed to be here. So when I present, when I talk to parents, and when I do trainings for therapists, they say, what's going on with anxiety? Why does it seem like there's so much more? Why does it seem like everybody is so uptight? Are we seeing more anxiety in kids in schools, or is it just our imagination? I think there is some increase in anxiety for sure. There's some debate about whether or not kids are actually more anxious from a clinical or a diagnosable point of view, and there's probably some bump up in it. Maybe 20 years ago they would have said 1 in 20 kids, and now easily they'll say 1 in 10. Sometimes we see numbers up as high as 1 in 5. But the other thing to really pay attention to is that we're a pretty fearful generation, and we are parenting in a pretty fearful way. And so the messages that we're giving to kids and the way that we're talking to kids and the language that we're using is pretty fear-inducing. This is a global village now, truly, and we hear all the information about every horrible thing that happens. I said to myself yesterday, I will not click on CNN.com anymore because of something that I saw on there yesterday. There's no reason why parents need to be subjected to all of the horror that happen to children. My mic is sort of going on and off. All right, so here's an example of what I'm talking about. So these stamps were actually designed and produced in accordance with Michelle Obama's Get Moving program. And somebody was hired and they came up with these great stamps. You never saw these stamps. Because after they were designed, then the committee of, or whatever, looked at these stamps and decided that many of these stamps showed behaviors that were too risky for a child to perhaps see on your water bill. I'm not making this up. This is exactly true. And 3 of the stamps in particular were deemed not appropriate for kids to see. The first one right here, he's on a skateboard. See, now he's got on a helmet, but he doesn't have elbow pads on. We cannot show children that kind of behavior. The second one down here, this is a kid doing a cannonball. This is way too risky. This kind of behavior, we can't have this in the United States of America. My son said maybe that's a puddle, and that's why it was deemed too dangerous. And then my favorite is the one right next to it. This is a kid doing a handstand, and you'll notice what's wrong with this is that he's not wearing a helmet. Now, I didn't make this up. As I said, these were the reasons, you can look it up online, that these stamps were not released. So this is kind of the environment that we're dealing with in terms of what we think that kids can handle, what we think is dangerous, what we think is risky. And the more that we use that language, and the more that we talk about things, the more that we let our kids know how dangerous the world is. And in fact, for a lot of things, including kidnapping and particularly abducted kidnappings, it's no different when we were kids. Those numbers have not changed since the 70s. They are exactly the same. But we get so much more information. So here are the anxiety disorders. Now, you'll see the average age of onset, and this is the average age because certainly for separation anxiety, 7.5 years. If you've got a little kid who's got separation anxiety, right, you didn't start doing this at 7.5. You've been doing this since about 2. those diagnostic categories are helpful. Those are shorthand for me. So as a clinician, if somebody says, oh, you're going to have a kid who's coming in who's got social anxiety, I know that the content of their anxiety is going to be that they have a hard time speaking to people. They're very worried about doing something that's going to embarrass or humiliate them. They've been stepping out of activities. It's a kid that we would probably say temperamentally is very shy or introverted. So it's shorthand for me. Just like if I told you guys that I was having a BLT for lunch, then I wouldn't have to describe to you how you take out the bacon and then you cut up the tomato and get the bread and toast it a little and put on the mayo. These categories, however, are not really where we want to put the focus as we're paying attention to what we're dealing with kids. Because most kids, if you look at what the research says, they will say that most kids who have anxiety have comorbid other things, which means that they have more than one psychiatric diagnosis. A lot of what they're talking about has to do with the fact that they have more than one of these. And basically it's describing the content that makes the child feel anxious. Now, let me say this, the content, and I'm going to explain this much, much more as we go along. The content doesn't really matter, but it's where everybody gets stuck. The reason the content is not where we want to focus is because the content changes. So if you are dealing with the content that is making your child anxious or making a child worried, and you adjust that content and you make it safe and you make it comfortable, as that child ages, something else will pop up. You are just playing whack-a-mole. If you've got a kid who's terrified that somebody is going to come in their house and kidnap them, and you put in a $50,000 alarm system and buy a 150-pound bull mastiff, which is what one of my clients did, that kid will find something else to worry about. So we really don't want to put all of our attention and focus on the content. It's what pulls almost everybody in, including many, many therapists and many, many books on anxiety. Focus on the content. It is the process that we really want to understand and that we really want to talk to our kids about. Anxiety does the same thing over and over and over again. And so as we talk about this, I'm going to explain to you the way that Reed and I came up with this approach to dealing with anxiety, and it's really a content-free approach. It's a process-based approach, and it's a skill-based approach, which really works throughout the life cycle. People ask me all the time, well, you're going to come and present at Hingham Middle School. Do you also talk about kids that are 5 or 6 or 7? Or if I'm doing elementary school, they say, well, can you also talk to kids that are in middle school or high school? The answer is yes. The content changes developmentally. The process stays the same. So let's talk a little bit about what happens if you are an anxious parent, if you are a worried parent, and you have children. Let me say this first of all. Everything that you're doing wrong, and as I'm talking, most of what anxious parents do, and in fact most of what parents do and most of what teachers in schools do actually makes anxiety stronger, and I'm going to explain why. But you are doing these things because the things that we do that make anxiety and worry stronger, we do because they are the most intuitive, loving, caring things to do. You are trying to keep your child safe, you are trying to keep your child comfortable, you're also just trying to keep the train on the tracks. You've got to get to work, you've got to get to bed, they've got to get to school. So you will bargain with this worry thing in order to keep things going. So as I'm talking about this, this is not about saying you're doing it wrong, it's not about blaming, but it's about recognizing that if I can give you some different ways to deal with this, particularly if you grew up as an anxious kid, the research is clear, and I'll give you some statistics about that. The research is clear that if you are a worrier, it is very likely that you will create a worrier. So, as I say when I'm talking to parents, if it's nature, it's you. If it's nurture, it's you. Right? Let's just get that out of the way, right? We know there's a genetic factor to anxiety, particularly with obsessive compulsive disorder. If I'm seeing a little kid with some OCD symptoms, it is almost a guarantee that the parents or grandparents are going to have OCD. We know that there is a predisposition, that different kids are wired in different ways that make them more susceptible to develop an anxiety disorder. But if a parent has an anxiety disorder, particularly a mom in the research, mom gets a little bit of a more hit, the likelihood of an anxious parent creating an anxious child is 6 to 7 times more likely than if you don't have an anxiety disorder. So what do children of anxious parents do? Well, they interpret ambiguous situations as more dangerous than other kids. The way they found this out is that they did a study where and they've done it many different times in many different ways. But they take an ambiguous picture, and they say they bring in, 7-year-old Eric, and they say, Eric, tell me a story about this picture. And it's some, man walking down the street. And Eric says, well, this is a man, he's walking down the street, and he's going to get an ice cream cone. We say, great, let's bring in your anxious mom, and you guys can have a discussion about it, and then we're going to come back in and ask you if there's anything additional you want to add to the story. So we let Eric and mom have a chat, blah, 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 and then we come back and we say, Eric, is there anything that you'd like to add to your story about the man? Well, what do you think happens to the story? More dangerous, right? So now Eric says, well, there's a man walking down the street and he's going to get an ice cream cone. I don't know that man. He's a stranger. And I'm not going to talk to him, and if he offers me ice cream, I will not take it, right? And that's what we see. Catastrophic parents have a habit of needing to provide a little bit more information than perhaps is necessary. So, for example, kid is way up high in a tree. Non-anxious parent will say, hey, you are way high up in that tree, you need to get down, that's not safe. And then the anxious parent then feels compelled to talk about what will happen if you fall out of that tree. So you are too high up in that tree. If you fall out of that tree, you are going to sever your spinal cord. Do you want to be in a diaper for the rest of your life? Is that what you want? One mom told me she had 3 boys, and she said they would be running around in the living room around the coffee table. And she would say, stop running, somebody's going to get hurt. And then she would say, I can just see it. An eyeball is going to hit the corner of that table, and that eyeball is going to explode, and there's going to be eye everywhere. Is that what you want? So we know that catastrophic language is a really a strong predictor of supporting worry in kids. Also, kids of anxious parents feel less competent in the world. One of the things we know about worried parents is they tend to be overprotective. They step in quickly. They want to make sure everything's okay. Now, if you think about somebody that you work closely with, if every time you went to do something, that person stepped in and said, oh, wait, no, let me do it. No, you're sitting down to have your lunch and they say, let me cut your steak for you. I don't want you to handle that knife. Or let me do this. Or I don't want you to go to the bus stop by yourself. I'll go with you. You wouldn't be able to help but to develop a sense that maybe you couldn't handle stuff. So when we look at anxious kids, when we look at kids who have anxiety disorders, and grown-ups too, we know that they are lousy at tolerating uncertainty, they're not so great at independent problem solving, and they score low on the autonomy scales. So we want to pay attention as parents, particularly if you're a worrier, that you don't step in. Now, if you are not a worrier and you have an anxious kid, they may be pulling you in. They're good at doing that too, but we have to pay attention to that quality. All or nothing thinking, right? So that perfectionism. We know anxious people tend to be cognitively rigid. They like things to go a certain way. There's a phrase, structure binds anxiety. They like routine. They have a hard time when unexpected things happen. So that all or nothing thinking, we see it a lot with homework time or grades, right? Anything below a 97 is a failure. We see kids really feeling like they need to hand in their homework, their math homework, absolutely perfect, that mom or dad has to check it and make sure that all the answers are correct. Anxious kids have a difficult time oftentimes with writing assignments. So math is hard because there's a right answer and a wrong answer, and writing assignments are hard because there's no way of knowing when it's perfect, and they sort of get caught up in that. So we have to pay attention to that all or nothing thinking. The other thing to know is that anxiety, when it is not treated, when it is not addressed in a child, is one of the top predictors of developing depression by adolescence and early adulthood. The problem with anxiety is that it's a bummer, and it's controlling, and it wears you out. So we get into sort of these little pessimistic, right? Why bother? When a kid gets to why bother, that's a dangerous place for a kid to be. So we know that it's really important to pay attention, not only to them sort of fostering a more balanced or even optimistic view of things, but we also really want to foster social connection. When we look at what puts kids at risk for depression, it is about social connection. Particularly if you are a teenager. When little kids are anxious, when they're more temperamentally inhibited, when they're shy or withdrawn, it is perfectly fine when we're in elementary school for mom and dad to go to the birthday party, to go to the swimming lesson, to hang out, so that child feels comfortable participating in the activities because mom or dad is right there. You hit middle school and it's no longer socially appropriate for you to go and attend the birthday parties. If kids start having sleepovers, mom can't go to the sleepover and stay at the sleepover. So what happens is the child just refuses the invitations and doesn't want to go. The thing about middle school, you learn a lot in middle school, but what you really learn is how to negotiate all these complicated life skills, and you start learning about managing difficult relationships and time management and figuring things out. Anxiety is about stepping back, and when kids step back, by the time they hit high school, if they're not engaged in their peer group, they are lonely and isolated. And in my world and in my experience, a lonely, isolated teenager is a depressed teenager. So we really want to pay attention to that. It gets better. This is the depressing stuff, and then it'll pick up. So the other thing we want to pay attention to is what we call somatic complaints. So that just means the body stuff that goes along with anxiety. Kids tend to talk about their anxiety in terms of their bodies. Any school nurses here? No, so school nurses, they're at the front lines of this. School nurses are my people. They're seeing the tummy aches, they're seeing the headaches. A lot of visits to the school nurse, a lot of visits to guidance, a lot of calls home. Child is sick, needs to be picked up. A lot of those are anxiety-based. Particularly younger kids don't have the language to talk about their feelings and to talk about their cognitions, but we can teach them. But the other thing too is that anxiety causes physical symptoms. So when a kid is really anxious and says, my tummy hurts, their tummy really does hurt. We have to be careful not to say, oh, it's just your worry. If you have stress-induced migraines, that's a migraine. Your head hurts. You would be kind of annoyed if somebody said to you, oh, well, that's just your stress. Yeah, I know it's my stress. It's making my head hurt. When kids are sick from anxiety and they vomit, that's real throw up. It's not pretend throw up. So we want to pay attention to that. But the thing about those somatic symptoms is there's something called anxiety sensitivity. That is a term that describes being overly sensitive to the normal stress or worry or anxiety reactions that your body has. So for example, you're going on a job interview. You really want this job. It's really important to you. So as you're getting ready for this job interview, your heart is pounding a little bit and your armpits are a little sweaty and you're thinking, oh, I'm a little nervous. I really want this job. You recognize that those symptoms have to do with the fact that you're anxious. If you have anxiety sensitivity, those symptoms freak you out. So now you're saying, oh, I really want this job and I'm really nervous and also I'm having a cardiac event, right? I'm stroking out. I can feel some tingling in my face. What's going on, right? So we want to, so what happens, and I'm going to explain this to you in a minute, and this anxiety sensitivity term will come back up again. But just so you know, particularly with kids that are somatic, we used to call it being a hypochondriac, right? But that's not politically correct anymore. So now we say that you somaticize, you have a somatic disorder, right? But you're very focused on your physical self. And anxiety and worry wreak havoc with that system in your body. So content, as I said, is not really the secret to solving this. We really want to teach kids how anxiety works. Now, I use anxiety and worry a little interchangeably, but they're actually different things. Worry is what we do in our prefrontal cortex when we're thinking. That's a cognitive process. Worry grabs onto your imagination. I have never met a good worrier who also doesn't have a good imagination. You can't imagine all the horrible things that are going to happen to you if you don't have this imagination that comes up with all those good details. So worry is the cognitive process that then fires off your alarm system and creates anxiety in your body. So we say, oh, I'm so anxious about this, or oh, I was feeling so anxious. Worry up here, anxiety in the body. But we're going to talk about principles that guide what I do, and I'm going to teach you what I do. It's not rocket science. You as parents can make a difference in the way that you respond and react to worry and to anxiety. But that's what we're looking for. We're looking for, if Reed were here, Reed's from North Carolina, and he would say, we got to chunk it up, right? Down here is the content. This is all the stuff that we worry about. Up here is the process. Up here are the principles. Up here is the understanding. And this is really, really where we want to be. So, I'm going to have to go back and hit the button on this. I'm going to show you this video, and then we're going to discuss.
I want everybody to meet Burger and Fries. Burger.
All right. That's Burger. So I can always tell when I'm watching the audience who are the cat lovers, right? Because they're all like, oh, poor Burger, right? He just needs some love, right? And the dog people, all of you who have Labrador Retrievers, you're like, oh my God, right? Who would have that in their house? So when I show this video to kids, and I show this to kids pretty early on in meeting them, except not if I'm treating them for cat phobia, then I wait a little bit. But what do you think my little worriers say about Burger and Fries? When I say, what's going on with Burger? What do they say? He's scared. Yeah. They don't say he's scary. They don't say he's mean. They say he's scared. Because they understand that. That's fight or flight. That's how they feel inside. And so all of these big behaviors, all of the, the thing about anxiety is that it brings with it screaming and temper tantrums and diarrhea and vomiting and hives and headaches and school refusal and jumping out of cars and hiding under beds and biting principals. It's not that complicated. Even though it looks so dramatic, even though it looks so big and scary, it does the same thing over and over and over again. And once we begin to understand its principles, then we're not so intimidated by it. Burger and Fries is doing the same thing that a kid does when a kid doesn't know what else to do. When a kid is set off his amygdala and is feeling trapped and feeling ill-equipped. And so what we have to do is we have to teach kids what this process is and then give them some skills, simple skills that work in every situation. By the way, anybody who wants these slides can get them from me. I'm happy to share them. If you want them, just email me and say, can I have the slides? It is not a ploy to capture your email address. If you want to be on my email list, there's a sign-up sheet out front. If you want to have the slides, just email and I'll send them to you. So, and they're also, they're filming this and they're going to have the slides and they're going to incorporate them into the editing that they do. But you're welcome to them. I'm not trying to obviously keep this information to myself. So, if you pay attention to this slide, and if you sort of absorb this, you will be miles, leaps and bounds ahead of what most people understand about worry and anxiety. Because it's this simple. Anxiety wants two things. It wants certainty and comfort, period. That's all it's ever wanted, that's all it ever will want. And when you realize that if you are doing things with your child to make sure that they feel certain and comfortable all the time, that anxiety is thanking you for your help. I was doing a training with some teachers last spring, I guess, somewhere in Massachusetts, and a teacher in the audience said, we had this woman come and she was talking about behavioral problems in the classroom, and she really thinks that a lot of behavioral problems in a classroom can be attributed to anxiety. And I said, well, that's great, because, you know, burger and fries, right? That's what we see. And he said, and he had her book, and I said, can I see the book? And I took the book and I opened it up to the chapter on anxiety, and the first line was, if you have an anxious child in your classroom, it is essential that you have a calm, organized, predictable classroom. And I thought, and I said to the guy, that's not what I'm going to say. Because that's what happens. What we do is we start working in cahoots with the anxiety. The anxiety is like a cult leader. And it moves into a family, and it starts making rules, and it demands that you follow its rules. There's that cognitive rigidity. When you break its rules, there is a price to pay, and that's why you start negotiating with this terrorist, because you're trying to keep things at bay. And remember what I said, kids who are anxious are lousy at tolerating uncertainty, and they're not so great at independent problem solving. They want to be comfortable, they want to know. So we start answering their questions. We put 504 plans in place that are all about accommodating. Somebody said to me the other day, they should be called 504 avoidance plans, and there's really some truth to that. They shouldn't be called 504 accommodation plans for anxiety, because accommodation in the anxiety world is not a good word. That is the exact opposite of what we want to do in order to effectively treat this. So, when we're teaching these skills to kids and parents, these are the three targets we're going after. First of all, we've got to provide some physiological information so that they can understand what's happening in their body. I can tell you, after doing this job for many, many years, that no child has arrived in my office with a clear understanding of what's happening in their body. Even kids who I am the 5th therapist that they've seen, and I'm often not the first therapist that kids see for anxiety. So we want to give them physiological information. In a moment, I'm going to describe to you exactly how I describe the worry and anxiety cycle to the kids and the parents that I see, using the exact same words. Next, we've got to talk about the cognitive part of this. We've got to talk about the worry. That's what's driving this train. And they need to have some understanding about how that works and how it interacts with their body. And then finally, they need some new principles. That's the process part of this. They need some generic skills that help them move into things rather than avoid things, because that's where anxiety gets power. So, sorry, my remote is very touchy. I just changed the battery and it's a little happy about that. All right, so this is anxiety. Okay, so first of all, there's something that triggers our worry. So somebody yell out a typical trigger that triggers a kid to worry. Test. Okay, so there's a test coming up. Test, 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 test. So you start imagining, right? You go to worst case scenarios. You start what-ifing. What if is the calling card of anxiety, right? What if, what if, what if, what if, what if? You start imagining all the things that could happen. This is happening in your prefrontal cortex. This is where we think, where we plan. This is where we manage things. It's also where we imagine. This is a higher level place in our brain. This is a newer place in our brain. So all that is going on, worry, 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 worry. Now, you have a prefrontal cortex. You also have another part of your brain. If we drill through your skull, we would hit it. It's called your amygdala. There's actually a pair of them. It's a small part of your brain. Amygdala means almond. It looks like an almond. This part of your brain is really, really primitive. Birds have it, squirrels have it, chipmunks have it, cats and dogs have it. Probably like sea sponges don't have it. This part of your brain has one job. Danger, no danger. It hangs out and waits for a danger signal. It does not differentiate between real danger, like a saber-toothed tiger is chasing me, And imagine danger, I have a math test tomorrow. As important as a math test could be, it is not dangerous. But once that amygdala gets a danger message, it says, my girl's in trouble. It doesn't say, oh, for Pete's sake, it's just a math test. It says, my girl's in trouble. Right away, it sends a message down to your adrenal glands. Adrenal glands, it shoots through your system, epinephrine, adrenaline. This is a jolt of energy designed to get your body ready for danger. So your heart rate increases. You start breathing faster because we need to get blood and oxygen to these big running away muscles because there's danger. Your pupils will dilate, so now you can see better. Your digestive system will shut down because now digesting your tuna fish sandwich is no longer high on the priority scale because we're in danger. Your body will throw some extra blood clotting stuff into your system. So if that saber-toothed tiger rips off your arm, then maybe you don't bleed out. It happens like that. Your body is now ready for danger, and you're actually trying to study for a math test or trying to take a math test. And remember that term, anxiety sensitivity. So your body starts doing this stuff, and now you're freaking out because your body feels so weird, right? So you're having worried thoughts. Oh, math test, math test. Oh, now your heart is starting to pound. Oh my God, right? When this amygdala is in charge, prefrontal cortex, so much in charge. You need your prefrontal cortex to take a math test. So what happens? You go in, oh my gosh, I forgot everything. I blanked out. So now you're freaking out because your body is, oh, what if I have diarrhea during my math test? My heart is pounding, I'm all sweaty. Once you start worrying about your physical responses because your anxiety sensitivity is kicking in, then your poor amygdala says, oh my gosh, I just got another danger message. Quick, more. Right? And then there you are. So that's what anxiety is. That's what panic is. It's a false alarm getting this system going. Now, as I said, nobody comes into my office knowing this. It is enormously helpful information. Because now the next time that they step into a situation that is triggering, which I'm going to have them do on purpose, they will know what's happening in their body. Kids come in to see me. How was your week? Oh, it was pretty good. Any yeah, I had some Tell me about it. So now we're talking the same language. They don't feel out of control. It might not feel comfortable. Certainly doesn't feel good to have that anxiety. But now there's a language and a common way that we can talk about it. And the goal is to have them stop avoiding what is really a very primitive, natural, and expected process. So once we get that out of the way, we want to start talking about worry in a way that we appreciate this whole system, right? So instead of saying, oh, I can't feel that way, let's admire it. Let's say thank you to that amygdala, right? We're not going to stop being scared. We're not going to try and get rid of all these sensations. One little girl said to me, well, can I just get my amygdala removed? Wouldn't that solve the whole problem? And I said to her, no, because you need it. When you are in a situation where, like I was riding my bike a few summers ago and this huge black dog tied to a tree by a big chain, off of his chain. I was watching him and I could see him. And you know how they sort of, mean dogs kind of stand up on their back legs and kind of do this? He lurched forward and his collar just exploded right off his neck. And he was coming at me. And not sort of like, hey, I'm sort of barking because my family says I'm supposed to. He was coming at me full out, teeth barred, growling, right? So that amygdala did exactly what it was supposed to do, and I got all this energy and I pedaled away from him. So we need this. And we can say to kids, if I thought and imagined about things the way that you're thinking and imagining about this, I would be scared too. Because that's the way your brain works. We need to change the way you respond to your thoughts and your worry. We need you to be able to appreciate that this system is part of who you are. We are not going to get rid of it. A key to treating anxiety is that we are eliminating nothing. Anxiety requires that we have a sensation, we have a thought, we have a fear, and we try and resist it. Anxiety gives us a sensation and we resist it. So we are not about eliminating. We are about stepping in, we are about accepting, and we are about understanding. And kids of all ages. I treat kids 4 up to you're dead. 4-year-olds get this. 4-year-olds get this. 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, kindergartners absolutely get this. So, here are just principles as I've been talking about them, and as I talk to kids. When you avoid the anxiety, it gets stronger. The more you step out, the more you avoid, the more you try and, as parents, make it more comfortable, the stronger the anxiety is going to get. When you go toward the fear, then the anxiety will get weaker. Not at first. If you're working on this, the anxiety is going to get stronger because you're stepping in, you're provoking it. But as you work toward this, as you apply the principles and the strategies that I'm going to show you in a minute, it gets weaker for sure. You can tolerate this. Once kids have that information, once they understand prefrontal cortex, amygdala, adrenal glands, epinephrine, and they use that language, 99.9% of the kids that I see call it their prefrontal cortex, their amygdala, their adrenal glands, and their epinephrine. They mess up the words a little bit in cute ways. One little girl calls it her Amy G. Dalla, which is so cute, her amygdala. But they like these terms. They like knowing that this is what we can, how we can refer to our body. If we get on offense, if we play this like a mental game, if we see that our worry shows up and tries to take over our lives, tries to impact our decision making, tries to boss us around, and we get on offense and start treating it like a game, then we are in the driver's seat. We want to be on offense. We want to have a different emotional response to the things that we are dealing with. So we start treating it like a game. Instead of saying, you know, oh, don't be scared, don't worry, there's nothing to be afraid of, we start talking to the worry. We start reacting and responding to it in a different way. Anxiety is a disorder of perception and reaction and response. And when we play with that, and when we have some humor and we have some positive energy and we bring that in, we put the kid, we put the parents, we put the family in a different position. They are no longer being ruled by this cult leader that's been dictating who sleeps where and what time you have to go out to the bus stop. Whoops, sorry, again, it did it again. All right, so we're going to look at these puzzle pieces. I'm going to run through them. We created these puzzle pieces purposely and thoughtfully as a way to make this as clear and concise and as seamless as we possibly could. If you look at the book, it says for ages 8 to 18. We didn't put that on there. The publisher put that on there. When the book first came out, Reed and I were doing this big thing up in Canada, and people kept raising their hands and saying, well, how would you use this for a 5-year-old? And we were like, well, you would just do this. And then they'd be like, how would you use this for a 6-year-old? Well, the same way. And then finally somebody said, well, on the book it says that you can only use it for 8-year-olds. Not true. Kindergartner certainly gets this. So here are the puzzle pieces. These put together come up with a plan that helps. So first one, expect to worry, right? So that's what I've been alluding to. It's not about eliminating anything. There are certain situations when of course you're going to worry. Situations where you're being judged, situations where you're being tested, situations where you're doing something new that you've never done before, situations where you're not sure how it's going to go, where there's a change. Of course you're going to feel worried. Who here has competed? You stand on the starting line and you feel anxious. Who here has taken a test? We all took our driver's license exam, remember? Were you nervous? I was, especially the second time. First time I hit a car. Yeah. Just a fender bender, but the guy, like, he's probably like 112. So this is the defining moment of my 6-year-old life, and I back into a car, and he just leans over and he turns the key out of the ignition and he says, "We don't usually pass people who hit cars during their driver's test." Oh, I cried. It was the end of the world. Yeah. So anyway, the second time when I went back, I was really nervous. All right, so we're going to stop being startled by it. Oh, hi, worry, right? The best thing we can do is to start to be bored by it, to know when it's going to show up. So we externalize it. We pull it out. We give it a name. We personify it, right? So you call it worry. You call it blob. Kids give it all sorts of names. They call it Fred. They call it Tony. I had one little boy who's next door neighbor. I said to him, now is there anybody you know that when they talk to you, you do not listen, right? You know better than to listen? And he said, Adam. And I said, who's Adam? Well, Adam was the next door neighbor who's a few years older, and Adam would come over and try and get him to do things. And his mom had said, you know what, Adam doesn't have helpful ideas, so we're not going to listen to Adam. So he named his worry Adam. So when Adam showed up, he knew to say, Adam, not going to listen to you. So we want to get bored by it. Look, this is worry in a nutshell. I could have written a book. It would have taken me 5 minutes. It would have been 1 page long. Blah, 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 and you can't handle it. That's worry. We can put anything into that blah, 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 right? You're going to get stung by a bee and you can't handle it. You're going to throw up at school and you can't handle it. You're going to get a B or a C or a D on your test and you can't handle it. There's going to be a thunderstorm and it's going to be scary and you can't handle it. You have to go to the dentist and the dentist might find a cavity and you can't handle it. Your mom is going to pick you up late and you're going to have to wait outside for an extra 5 minutes before she gets there and you can't handle it. That's what worry says. That slide I showed earlier, that sense of incompetence, that the world is a dangerous place, that I can't figure out what to do next. That's what we're going up against here. And that's the skill that we want to promote in these kids. You can handle it. You might not like it. Kids say, oh, but I don't like to get a shot. Well, yeah, no, it would be weird if you did. Right? You're not supposed to like it, but you can handle it. I don't like to throw up. Well, good, it would be weird if you did. If you enjoyed vomiting, we would have a very different problem on our hands, right? So it's not about liking it. It's about being able to tolerate it, being able to handle it, being able to feel uncomfortable, being able to expect that there are so many situations in life where you are not going to feel like you've got it. And I'm sure as you sit here and think about the successes that you've had in your life, the things that you've done that were challenging, the decisions that you made, the houses that you bought, the people that you married, the people that you divorced, the jobs you took, the puppies that you adopted. There was a level of uncertainty in that. You didn't know exactly how it was going to go, but you moved forward anyway. And anxiety demands the opposite. That's why it is such a powerful master. And that's why it makes people's world so small. So we're going to learn how to pay attention and how to ignore. How to differentiate between what's a signal and what's noise. Because that alarm system has been going off. And we know with that amygdala, the more we fire it off, the more it fires off. It develops a bit of a hair trigger. So we need to differentiate. Change those patterns. So this is just a illustration from the Casey book, Playing with Anxiety. That's the book that we wrote for tweeners. And this is just a picture that we use to illustrate that these reactions are normal. We want to normalize, normalize, normalize. This is Oscar. That's one of my cats. I have a bunch of them. Oscar is very unattractive, but he's also stupid. And this is Buddy. He is our next door neighbor's brown lab. We made him a bloodhound in the book for purposes of confidentiality. So routinely, Buddy walks up our front walk and runs into Oscar, one of our cats, and they go into this fight or flight mode. They go into this defensive posture. And Oscar does his, roar thing, and Buddy does his roar thing. And they do it because it's natural and it's expected. And then they move on. The next picture in the book actually is Oscar in the house sleeping under the couch. He doesn't ruminate about it. Oscar doesn't say to me, hey, have you seen Buddy? Has he been out yet? Right? Because yesterday we had this run-in. It was so uncomfortable. I don't want to do it again. Right? He goes outside, he deals with Buddy, and then he goes on with his life. Right? So it's normal, normal, normal. A great assignment that you can give to your kids that I have done with a lot of my clients is I have them go online and look up the defense systems of animals. What do animals do to protect themselves? What's their amygdala doing? I mean, it's amazing what animals do. There's that octopus that sort of turns into whatever surface it's on. Have you seen that? Like it turns into the rock, or it turns, it's unbelievable. So we just want to look at this through different eyes. Rather than as something to be avoided, something to be feared, we want to appreciate it. And we want to expect that it's going to show up. If you never feel worried, you are not growing and learning. You are not moving forward if you are comfortable all the time. So I've already alluded to this. We're going to talk to worry. We're going to pull it out. We're going to take it out. We're going to give it a name. If you are a worried parent, if you are an anxious parent, if you do safety chatter and you're this, pull out your worry too. And with your child, give your worry a name. Have them start pointing out to you when your worry shows up. Enormously helpful. But we want to have some distance from it. I will tell you that immediately being able to pull that worry out and have it out here changes the dynamic. Now you and your child are on the same team and you are talking to something outside of him. I don't like kids being told that anxiety is who they are. I don't like having them be told that it's like diabetes. We try to do that as a way to sort of make it be okay because we don't want to, we're trying to destigmatize these kinds of things. But that's too permanent for me. I want it to be out here. I want us to be playful with it. So, the content trap. When we're talking about worry, just a little reminder, we don't want to talk about what they're worried about. Now, the content is going to come up. If you are a dog-phobic person and you are working on your dog phobia, dogs are going to be involved. But that's not what I mean by staying out of the content is that the discussion is not about how to change this. It's about how to change this. So, if a child, let's take the example of somebody who's afraid to throw up. Very common phobia that people have, and it rules your life because if your goal is to never throw up, you've got to do a lot to make sure that that doesn't happen. So, very typical, kid comes down and says to mom, do you think I'm going to throw up today? And mom says, no, you look fine, you look good, you're okay. Well, how do you know? Well, your color looks good. Well, could you take my temperature? Sure, I'll take your temperature. Your temperature is normal. Okay, well, I don't think I can eat any breakfast because, you know, remember 2 years ago I had breakfast and then I threw up. So breakfast no longer a part of what are you, and I think some kids are sick at school. Well, who's sick at school? Well, Amy threw up in math class. Oh, well, how close did you get to Amy? Well, let me see, let me feel your head. No, you're fine. Look, if you get to school and you start feeling sick, then just go to the nurse and she'll take care of you. Or call me and I'll come pick you up. That is all content-based reassurance. And the reason it doesn't work is because you cannot close the certainty gap. You cannot say to your child, and they know that you can't say to them, I guarantee you, you won't throw up today. That may work for about 2.5 seconds, and they'll say, how do you know? How do you know I won't throw up? Because the one thing that vomit has going for it is the element of surprise. I have a bet going, so I have to ask you guys a question. I have a little friend I treat. She's not so little anymore. Vomit phobia. The deal is, wherever I go, I will ask, has anybody here never, ever thrown up? Okay, I'm still ahead. I've been asking this question of thousands and thousands of people. One lady in Pittsburgh has not thrown up. But everybody else, and when I see her, I always say, so I was here and here and here, and I asked the crowd as per our protocol, and 0 people raise their hands. It's not a matter of if you're going to throw up, it's a matter of when. And you won't like it, and it will be gross, and it could take you by surprise, and it could be humiliating. I actually had her watch the video of, do you remember George Bush 1 threw up in the Prime Minister of Japan's lap during that breakfast? Do you remember that? You can watch it online. It's sort of sad, yeah. But I mean, he's just sitting there, and he literally just sort of like turned and barfed into the Prime Minister, right? The President of the United States. Right? Humiliating. This was luckily before Twitter, can you imagine? That would have been, woo! Yeah, it went around fast anyway. So being able to say, right? Being able to say, I don't know, but you'll handle it. You won't like it, but you'll handle it. So we want to talk to that worry. Worry shows up, so that's a content-based intervention. No, you're fine. Oh, your color is good. You haven't eaten meatballs for 3 years. Your temperature is fine. You wash your hands all the time here. Here's a little bit of extra, right? That's all content reassurance. Doesn't work. Take that worry out, and the response is, Mom, am I going to throw up today? Do you think I'm going to throw up today? Could happen, right? Now, when I teach that to kids, there's always the mom leans back, so the kid is here and the mom leans back on my couch and gives me the, right? Yeah. Could happen. You won't like it, but you'll handle it, right? And then they start asking all the questions. You stay out of the content. There's your worry again, right? Your worry demands certainty and comfort. So it's up to its old, boring, lame, repetitive tricks. There's your worry. We need to deal with the process of worry, not the content. So any content that's there, the process is going to be the same. Do you understand the differentiation I'm making? Yeah. So when we talk to worry, I'll get to you saw the 3 ways to talk to worry. That'll be on the next slide. So here's some examples of sort of content reassurance. Right? It's when you give stats, when you give rational information, right? Anybody here afraid to fly? Okay, so you know that flying is much safer than driving in a car, but I bet you drove here, right? And there's these big snowbanks and you can't see where you're going, but nonetheless, you gathered up all your courage and you got in your car and you drove here, right? Doesn't matter that people will say, statistically, you will have to fly, starting today, for 26,000 years for your number to be up. Doesn't matter, because when you get on a plane, you could get a piece of paper and you could get it notarized by a lawyer and you could bring it up to knock on the cockpit door and say, Captain, I need you to sign this paper. This guarantees 100% that this plane won't crash. And he's not going to sign that paper, and he will say, I'm sorry, ma'am, but the plane is really safe and we've done all the safety checks, etc., but I cannot sign this and guarantee you 100% that the plane won't crash. So she's not going to get on it, or she's certainly not going to feel comfortable on it. Maybe she'll get on it. She has a Bloody Mary. So when we give stats, when we give statistics, doesn't matter. When we give reassurance, doesn't matter. They are trying to close the certainty gap, and anxious people can't do that. How do you know, Mom? How do you know? I had one woman come to see me and she said, I am really worried about what's going to happen after I die. I go, okay. She said, so tell me. I go, that's not what I do, right? She said, well, just tell me something. Just tell me what you believe. Brainwash me. Just tell me what you think happens, as long as it's good. Tell me what you think happens, and then I'll believe it, and then I'll have a plan, and then I can move forward. And I said, I can't do that. That's one of man's unanswerable questions. But she wanted that certainty. A lot of people remember the whole sort of world was going to end thing, that Mayan calendar thing? Yeah, that was good for business. Yeah. I haven't seen those people in a while. So this is process. So instead of focusing on the content, we're going to focus on the process. How worry gets control. How worry steps in and makes you feel incompetent, makes you doubt, makes you want to avoid, right? So that sounds like worry to me. Now remember, we want to talk back to worry. So you cue talking back. That sounds like worry to me. What could you say back to worry? That sounds like your worry trying to make you feel like you can't handle stuff. How would you like to respond to that? Blah, 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 and you can't handle it. The opposite of that is, this feels uncomfortable to me, or I'm not sure how this math test is going to go. I'm not sure if I'm going to have fun at the birthday party, but I'll handle it. So kids take on different tones with their worry. For some people, just expecting it is enough. So when my self-doubt shows up and says, oh, you can't do this, or why'd you agree to do that, or people aren't going to like it, I say, okay, thanks for sharing. Right, there's my self-doubt. We all have that self-doubt that pops up. I was talking to an author, a writer, and she's a really successful writer, like on Oprah successful. told me that every time she sits down at her computer to start writing, her worry shows up and says, you've got nothing else to say. Nothing else that you say is meaningful. So we know that it pops up. So sometimes it's just enough to turn to it and say, oh, hi, thanks for sharing. Yep, you always show up when I go up to bat, or you always show up when I'm getting ready for a test. For some kids, they're going to take care of it. Most kids are pretty aggressive with it. Most kids, particularly younger kids, are sort of like, I'm going to punch you in the face, worry, and I'm going to knock you out. But there are some kids that's just not their personality. I had one little girl who, her worry was a worry mouse. She imagined it was a little mouse. And her worry mouse would show up at bedtime, which is when worry shows up a lot because it's quiet and it's dark and there's a lot of room in there for that prefrontal cortex to get jazzed up. And so we came up with a plan that at night, when the worry mouse showed up, she said, I'm just going to throw that worry mouse out the window. So great, okay. So she comes back in a few weeks later. How did it go? Oh, pretty good. You know, my worry showed up. Blah, blah. She said, but I couldn't do what you told me to do. Oh, she said, because remember the worry mouse and I was going to throw it out the window? Yeah. She said, well, it came time to throw the worry mouse out the window. This was in January. I live in New Hampshire, right? She said, I couldn't throw the poor worry mouse out the window. You know, then he'd be out there all by himself, and it'll be all dark and cold. And so instead, I said, hey, worry mouse, I know that you don't know how to do anything but worry, but I'm going to handle this. So I'm going to tuck you under the covers, and you can just go to sleep, and I'll be in charge. I know, so sweet, right? But that was just a different approach. Most kids don't do that, to be honest. Most kids are sort of, you know, they'll say to me like, can I call my worry a bad word? And I'll say, sure. And they'll say like, stupid. And I'll think, oh, okay. You know. So this is the next piece. Sorry, here's my, be unsure and uncomfortable on purpose. So this is kind of the meat of the sandwich. This is the being on offense part of things. This is where you're really stepping in. We want to compete with those worried thoughts in this prefrontal cortex. We want to be on offense. Remember, this is not about eliminating anything. So it's not about getting rid of worry. It's not about feeling calm. It's not about feeling comfortable. It's about stepping in on offense. Bring it on. This approach, when you get kids to take an active role, very effective, because remember that epinephrine, think of that as a jolt of energy. We're going to use that energy in a different way. We're going to harness that energy. We're going to go after it. So instead of being defensive posture, right? Anxiety requires a defensive posture. I have to step back, can't handle this, avoid, lessen, accommodate. Instead of that, we want them to step in. You have to step in. You have to be triggered. The only way that this amygdala relearns is when you bring it into the situation, let it hang out for a while, so that it can begin to get a new understanding of what you've been telling it. So let me give you an example. Person is afraid of elevators. And she's been able to go on elevators when she has to, when it's necessary, but you know, she gets in and she just, you know, and she imagines all the horrible things that could happen in an elevator. She gets a job in a new building on a 28th floor. It is no longer convenient, to say the least, for her to avoid elevators. So she wants to get over this elevator phobia. She can get in that elevator and she can do this exposure work. She can get in this elevator and she can say, all right, I'm just going to tolerate this elevator, right? And she can pray to whoever she prays to, and she can hope that the doors open, and she can imagine the cable snapping on the elevator, and she can look at when the inspection happened, and she can add up the weight of the people in the elevator to make sure that we're not exceeding the limit. And she can do that over and over and over again. And that would be practice. But she is still bringing her worry into the elevator with her, and the worry is in charge. The worry is still firing off the amygdala. She is still getting cranked up, and she's still having an exhausting morning to start her day, even in anticipation of getting in the elevator. So instead, we put her on offense, right? All right, you're going to get into the elevator. I want you to take your pulse. I want you to find out what your normal resting pulse is. Say it's 61. I want to see in those 28 floors how high you can get your pulse. I want you to take your pulse when you get out of the elevator and see how high it is. I want you, before you leave for work, I want you to put on some extra deodorant because you are going to sweat like a pig, right? Let's go. When you have that stance, this prefrontal cortex is not sending that same message to the amygdala. Now, some of it's going to sneak through at first, for sure. But you are providing a competing emotional state. So the way this works with kids, right? So say you had a kid with a dog phobia. Okay, so we could have them touch the dog, right? And so many people say, look, I want you to go up, get close to the dog, feel all that anxiety, and then back off, calm yourself down, and then walk a little closer to the dog, and when you feel that feeling, back off. Okay, sure, maybe that'll work. But that's too slow for me, particularly when I know that what works much faster is to say, all right, when you go and touch that dog, I want you to, let's find dogs. Right? Let's call your neighbors. Let's go purposely. Let's choose to go over to the friend's house that has a dog, that's a friendly dog, but that you know is a kind of, rambunctious friendly dog. And we're going to go in. And I want you to bring that worry right in there. I want you to turn to that worry and say, worry, I'm tired of you bossing me around. We are going in and petting that dog. Offense. All that energy that has been used to sort of do this is now used in purpose of moving forward. And what happens is they can handle it. I can't tell you how many times the kids have come back and adults have come back and said, well, I did exactly what you said, right? I'm supposed to get anxious. I'm supposed to get worried. And so I got in the car, or I got onto the highway, or I went up to the dog, or I ordered the American cheese at the deli counter. I have socially anxious kids do those kinds of things. And maybe I wasn't doing it right, they say, because I didn't feel as anxious as I thought I was going to. Because they're competing. We want to move into it. Exposure plus, we call it. Rather than, we go in. I am a medically phobic person. I had a horrible, horrible medical phobia for most of my years growing up and into my 20s. I would have full-blown panic attacks. If anybody was even hinting or talking about something that was gross, and that encompasses a lot of human behavior, I would have a full-blown attack, and ultimately I would pass out. But it wasn't like a swooning, it wasn't like a Scarlett O'Hara type thing. It was ugly and messy, and there was, sometimes vomiting involved and that kind of stuff. So I'm over that now for the most part. I have fainted twice in the last 16 years, which is really good compared to the previous, 30, yeah. So twice in the last 16 years. But I am on offense with this thing. I am constantly looking for opportunities for people to tell me gross things, particularly about bones, for whatever reason. That's the last vestige of this thing. Just the other day, I was with my friends who I work out with in the morning, and my friend Matt said, oh, did you hear what happened to Ari? I go, oh no, what? And then Pete says to Matt, don't tell Lynn, because Pete actually was present during the last fainting episode. Don't tell Lynn. And I said, no, tell me. And he said, it's really gross. And I said, I want to know, let's go. And he proceeded to tell me this story. Poor Ari was out getting the mail at midnight, and his family was asleep in the house, and he decided he would go out and, he was putting the recycling out or something, slipped down the driveway, shattered his kneecap, couldn't get back into the house. So then there was a big, long, disgusting story about how Ari got himself back into the house with a shattered kneecap, right? Perfect for this kind of therapy, right? Give me more, give me more, give me more. So we want to be on offense. This is the exact opposite of what anxiety demands. Yes? Yeah. Why it shows up?
Well, I'm kind of wondering because, fear of heights, I don't actually have it, but like my daughter, just from, not even knowing her and just getting to know her, like there's really almost a sensory component to it, like this real physical thing. So having two parents that are like, get on the bike, we're right there, what's the big deal, or maybe you're not ready, we should take it back, awful things like that.
Maybe you're just a loser. Right. Yeah.
You're not ready for the bus.
Yeah.
It's funny because now that she's older, I reflect back on that, and she does seem to have, this physical unbalance of,
sure,
and we don't avoid things.
Right.
Is that a different manifestation? Have you,
No.
or is it pretty much?
No, I mean, the thing about it, yeah. So, and there's a lot of talk about sort of why people have fears about certain things. And I mean, that's kind of interesting. Why do I pass out? I don't know, my dad does it. So I grew up, I wonder often, if my dad was an orthopedic surgeon, would I do this? No, I watched my dad turn green. Whenever we would get a cut or something, my mother would say to him, "Do not pass out on me," right? But down he would go. So there's certainly, I know that there's certainly some sort of genetic component to my vasovagal wonk, you know. So who knows? Certain things, you know, I've treated plenty of kids who weren't afraid of dogs, and then they got bit by a dog in the face, and so now they're afraid of dogs. So the why is interesting, but it doesn't really influence the treatment very much. So because sometimes we don't know. Sometimes it's obvious. You know, the boy who got bit in the face by the dog, it was obvious why he had dog phobia, right? Maybe your daughter is more afraid of heights because she does have some vestibular thing going on which makes her feel not so confident, right? So that's interesting, but it doesn't really inform the treatment very much. You know, I mean, it sort of comes up. But you know, one of the things when we look at post-traumatic stuff, when we're dealing with that, and by post-traumatic it means the trauma is over. This is not for kids that are currently undergoing trauma, but it's a differentiation between then and now, right? So I don't know. I mean, there's why are some people afraid of snakes and some people not? Why are some people? Why do some people love scary movies and other people don't? Why do some people find spicy food flavorful when I find it just painful, right? But anyway, so you know, I mean, sometimes the answer is obvious and sometimes not. But that's the content that we get involved with. This is a very good example. I was dealing with a little girl that I've seen for a while, and she's adorable. She's an identical twin, and she is anxious and her sister is not. This is my third set of identical twins where one is anxious and one is not, right? So it's this nurture-nature combination thing. So anyway, she gets a new teacher. The new teacher is very nice and very caring, but my little friend, we'll call her Ella, which is not her real name. So Ella starts 4th grade and starts doing all her worry stuff. Like she has to ask, you know, 5 times what the homework assignment is, and she has to make sure her backpack is okay, and she wants to know this and this and this. And the teacher, out of caring, is very concerned, and so starts asking the mom, did something happen? Did she experience something as a child that made her feel so insecure? Did blah, 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 blah? And the answer to all those questions is no. Mom is a super worrier, so mom has been doing safety chatter for most of the kids' lives, and we're working on that. But the teacher, and very sort of obsessed with me. I had known her since kindergarten, and her worry just jumped from content to content to content. Worry grabs on to wherever it can get the most traction. So whatever is important to you, or wherever you feel least confident, worry moves in and grabs onto. OCD, in obsessive compulsive disorder, the content never matters in that. And OCD has a way of grabbing onto the thing that matters to you the most. That's why it changes developmentally. So 6-year-olds don't worry about the same thing that 16-year-olds worry about. So whatever it can get its hands on, and it switches and it jumps around. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was a great question and a long answer, but I think that's an important understanding of sort of why when we move away from the content, it allows us to work through the life cycle more effectively. You know, 16-year-olds are not worried about monsters under the bed. They're worried about when you kiss on the first date, you know, where does your tongue go? I've had that discussion. Yeah. Interestingly, I had a kid who was really germ-phobic, a girl who was really germ-phobic, and she was very concerned about who touched her food, and she would eat sort of like cheese nips out of the box with a fork, and she was washing her hands all the time. And she was a beautiful, lovely young girl, and she got her first boyfriend when she was 16. And suddenly, it didn't matter to her what went into her mouth as much, which I pointed out to her and to her father. Yeah. All right, so instead of trying to stay certain, instead of trying to stay comfortable, we're going to move into these things on purpose with attitude. This is where bribery comes in, right? I give kids rewards, Jolly Ranchers, Tootsie Rolls, whatever we decide on, not for calming down, but for purposely stepping in. Boy who was afraid of dogs. It was actually the boy who was bit in the face by a dog, right? He decided that they were going to go hiking in one of the White Mountains on a beautiful September Sunday. He knew that there would be dogs on the trail. And he made a deal with his mom that he would get paid, I think it was like $1 per dog. So what happens is that changes the emotional tone. Instead of him saying, all right, I'm going to go hiking, hope I don't see any dogs, he was like, oh, there's a dog, $1 for me. There's a dog. And by the time he finished that hike, it had seen 9 and after. That was his session with me. Dogs. I'm going to just change my mic. Sorry. All right, do you understand this concept? It's really important, and it's really different. Here it is in a nutshell. If I'm comfortable and uncertain, I'm on the right track. If I'm moving towards something, that's what learning is about. If you are in second grade and you figure everything out and you're good with second grade, well, now it's time to move into third grade where you don't know everything. So we want to promote that. We want to value uncertainty. We want to revel in the mights and maybes of life. You might. Am I going to throw up today? You might. The only thing I can tell you about you and vomiting today is today you might or you might not. That's it. That's all I got. Right? So we're going to revel in that. And again, I made mention of this before, but being able to distinguish signal versus noise. Brains are busy places. You know, how many of you, when you came home with your first baby, right, and you're walking down the stairs and you think, oh my God, I could slip on the stairs and smush this baby, right? And then you shake it off, right? That was just busyness. If you're an anxious parent, then you say to your husband, we need to buy a ranch. We cannot have stairs anymore. Yeah, I had one, this is a friend, and the mom was so worried about the baby waking up, so worried that after you got the baby to sleep that they might wake it up, that she took that blue painter's tape and put X's on all the places on the stairs that creaked, and so you weren't allowed to step on those stairs. And then she thought that her husband peeing into the toilet water was too loud. So she told him that he had to sit. And for whatever reason, that's where he drew the line, because there were a lot of lines he didn't draw before that. So they compromised, and he had to take toilet paper and like sort of put it across the thing, and then he had to pee onto the toilet paper so that the splash noise wasn't as loud. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I hope you feel better now that I've told you that story, right? You all feel better. You're like, woo! All right. So not eliminating anything, but we're looking at this worry thing. We're looking at these experiences through a different lens. The I can manage it lens, even though it's uncomfortable. Even though I might make a mistake, even though I might make a fool of myself, even though I might be embarrassed, even though I might say the wrong thing, even though my body might feel a little funny. I can manage that because I know what's going on. And not only do I know what's going on, I'm going to start seeking it out, because that's how I'm going to retrain my brain. That's how I'm going to, my worry is no longer going to be in charge of me, and this is the process that I'm going to go through in order to make that happen. We're going to stop telling that poor, dependable, primitive alarm system that it needs to go off all the time. I'm going to change the message. When I change the message, when somebody says to me, oh my God, let me tell you about what happened with whatever gross thing they're going to tell me, and I step into it, my amygdala doesn't go, oh! My amygdala says, she's got this. I get curious, I ask questions. It makes a huge difference. So here are some messages to try out, right? I'm willing to feel uncomfortable. I'm willing to not know what's going to happen. I'm willing to feel uncertain about how this is going to play out. I'm willing to take some reasonable risk in my life. Anxiety is all about trying to eliminate risk, and it's an impossible task. So reassurance, that's where we get caught up in the content. And it's hard to break this habit. So if you have a worrier, it's hard to break the habit of providing that external reassurance. Internal reassurance is fine. If you've got a kid who's afraid of throwing up and they learn to say to themselves, I don't think I'm going to throw up today, but if I do, I'll be fine. That's internal reassurance. External reassurance is obviously when they come to us asking those questions and we provide that information. We want internal reassurance. They need to learn how to do that. That's why when you say, that's your worry talking, what are you going to say back to it? That's a cue for internal reassurance rather than you stepping up and solving the problem. Mom, what happens if you're late? What if you don't pick me up after school? Right? And then you go right into, okay, so this is what will happen and blah, 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 blah. A non-worrier, you tell them that once and they go, okay, thanks. The worrier needs more and more information. Yeah, but what if your doctor's appointment runs long? Well, it won't run long. Yeah, but what if you're getting your teeth cleaned and your dentist appointment goes long because somebody comes in and they've got a tooth knocked out, and so then you're late? Well, then you could just call me on my cell phone. But what if your cell phone isn't charged? Well, I always charge my cell phone. No, remember 3 weeks ago when you forgot to charge your cell phone and then I tried to call you and you weren't getting my messages? Right? External reassurance, looking for certainty. You put a stop to that. You can even say, I'm not having this conversation with your worry. This is between you and your worry. I'm here to love you and support you, but I am not on team worry. You have this conversation. Because worry is doing the same thing. But that's how we get sucked in. Short term, it works like a charm. Mom, will you tell me before we go to bed tonight, will you tell me 5 times that nobody will steal me? It's got to be 5. And if you say no, well, it's a long night. So you say yes. But it just moves, and pretty soon you've got a 2-hour bedtime ritual that you're dealing with. So here's just some more language. This is just some more of the things that I want kids to be able to say. I'm willing to not know. Don't have to love it, but I'm willing. I'm willing to take this risk. Why? Because this anxiety thing, this worry thing, is bossing me around. It's exhausting. It's getting in the way, which brings us to the next. Oh no, well, this one first. We'll get to the next one. People ask me, how do you get kids to do this? And you'll see the next step after this is that you got to have a want to. So breathe. So here we get to breathe, right? So let me be clear. I am totally in favor of breathing. I think it's awesome. I think everybody should do it on a regular basis. I think that breathing skills can be really helpful as a reboot. Being able to breathe, take those calming breaths, sort of get your footing, is a really important way as you're learning these skills sometimes to just sort of reset. The problem with breathing and relaxation skills is that many, many programs on anxiety and for children focus on relaxation and breathing. And they do not address the cognitive stuff going on. And so if the goal becomes, in order for you to step forward, you have to feel calm, you have to feel comfortable, you have to feel relaxed, they won't get anywhere. Remember, that happens in a nanosecond. And they've got all that energy in their body to then tell a kid, look, before you go into your test, take 10 deep breaths and then start taking your test. And they've got no other information than that. They'll take their 10 deep breaths, right? And then they'll come back and say to me, I tried to take my 10 breaths and it didn't work. because they have no understanding. They don't have the big picture. They don't have the process. And remember, all along I've been saying is that if we are going to deal with anxiety, we have to get rid of the idea that we are eliminating anything. And so if you say to a kid, this is about relaxation, it will not work. The other thing is that relaxing for some people is not about calming down. I do not relax by being still. Do not take me on a vacation where I'm going to lie on the beach and do nothing. I want to go to Montana and hike up a mountain. So if you're talking to kids about rebooting, maybe breathing exercises would work, maybe jumping jacks actually would work, maybe running around the house 5 times. But focusing solely on breathing and relaxing. Progressive relaxation at bedtime. Do you know what happens to worriers when all you teach them is progressive relaxation at bedtime? It calms down their body enough so that their mind can go crazy. It doesn't do anything. So again, meditation, relaxation, breathing, all that kind of stuff is awesome. We know that it's helpful for our mind and our body and our spirit, but when you are dealing with an anxious kid in the moment, it's just not enough. It's just not enough. Now, research for a long time in terms of panic attacks has moved way past breathing as being effective. Way past breathing. In fact, there are David Burns, for example, when somebody has a panic attack and he's working with them, he makes them stand up and do 50 jumping jacks so that they get breathless, so that they bring on the very thing that they fear the most, want to bring up their heart rate, bring up their breathing. Okay, so are you clear about that? Breathing is great, but if we focus on breathing and relaxation with anxious kids, it's not going to be enough. Reboot, yes. Treatment strategy, falls flat. Okay, so know what you want. I'm asking kids to do all this stuff, and parents will say to me, well, how do you get them to do it? Well, there's got to be a hook. I've got to have a goal that they're invested in. Now, I don't care what we're working on first in terms of content. If a child comes to me and they're willing to work on some content that isn't really what the parents are so concerned about, that's okay with me. This kid wants to work on being able to go to birthday parties, and the parents are really concerned about their inability to take tests at school. I'm going to start with what the kid wants, because I can teach the process based on a content that they're invested in, and then I'll play dumb and say, okay, all right, so now you've got this process thing figured out. You know how this works. Is there anywhere else can you think? Let's think. Where else could we use this? Because it's so versatile. And once they get the understanding that the content doesn't matter, and they hear that from me all the time, then they start being able to move and use it in other places. It increases their autonomy and increases their sense of self-confidence. Right? So know what you want. They've got to have some, they've got to have some skin in the game. So for older kids, actually, for adolescents, this is not that hard. Or sometimes it's not that hard, because they're beginning to recognize what the anxiety is getting in the way of. Younger kids sometimes, particularly for kids that have sleeping issues and they're in the parent's bed, and they're 6 or 7 and they're not sleeping in their own room, and the parents would be like, we want the kid out of our bed, right? So then you talk to the 6-year-old, hey, mom and dad think you should sleep in your own bed. And the 6-year-old's like, why? This totally works for me, right? I don't want to get out of the bed. I don't want to get out of the bedroom. So sometimes we have to have what's called a family goal, and that's really just a parent goal, and then we have to sweeten the pot a bit, right? So behavioral modification works, right? Putting marbles in the jar every time a kid is flexible, every time a kid steps toward something that makes them anxious, rewarding that. No in a row behavioral stuff. Right? You sleep in your bed 7 nights in a row, that is not a good idea. You sleep in your bed for 5 nights. I don't care if it takes a month. When they get those 5 nights, then they can get the reward. But there's got to be something that motivates them to do this. And I will start where the child wants me to start, because it's the process that I'm teaching. And then the content comes after. So I just have a stack of index cards in my office, and I write, I want blank. I want to go on the 8th grade camping trip, And so I'm willing to practice getting worried by sleeping over my friend's house. I want to get my driver's license, so I'm willing to go out for drives with my dad and talk back to my worry. So I want to, so I'm willing. So bridge back to your success. The thing we know about anxiety, kids with anxiety suffer from amnesia. Adults do too. So they have a success, and they will negate it, they will forget it. So we'll be working, I was working with this teenage girl, adorable, sweet, socially anxious, and she would have an outing with her friends. She always thought she didn't have friends, and she was too ugly, and nobody liked her. And so the mom would come in and say, oh, she went out with her friends, and then they came back home, and they were downstairs. I could hear them laughing, such a good time. You know, I could see her really making such a nice connection with her friend. And the daughter would say, no, I wasn't happy. And the mom would say, yeah, I heard you laughing and having such a good time. No, I wasn't. That wasn't me. The mom would say, I'm sure it was you. I saw you. Yeah, no. So we have to help them remember their successes. We have to help them build what I call with kids reminder bridges. And sometimes that means, having a journal or just having a piece of paper on the wall or something that keeps track of the successes so it's right there. One parent did this great thing where every time the child said something that was anti-worry, they called it, sort of against worry, she would just write it down. And then they would come in to see me, and the mom would read them all off out loud in front of me, and the kid was just like, like just owning it. And that builds up their confidence. So we want to help them keep track of that. Sorry. The other thing, too, is that this process of not knowing how to do something, feeling uncomfortable, feeling frustrated, feeling unsure, is an experience that most people have had and most kids have had. So you begin to look, even out of the worry realm, you just begin to look at regular day-to-day experiences that kids have had. Everybody's learned how to do something, right? They've learned how to walk, they've learned how to talk, they've learned how to dress themselves, they've learned their times tables, they've learned how to drive a car if they're older teenagers. And so being able to say, let's remember how you were at the beginning, how you worked through all the messiness of it, and how you got here. This is the same process that we're doing. We just want to normalize it. We just want to make it a part of examples, an example that they can use. So taking action on your plan, this is the last step, just means that we're putting all the pieces together. So when I teach the steps to kids, I teach them in the order that I just taught to you. Right? We got to expect to worry, talk to the worry, we've got to be unsure and uncomfortable, all that kind of stuff. In real time, in the real world, there's got to be something that they want to accomplish. There's got to be some way that I can get them engaged in this. And believe me, not every kid comes into my office all excited that they get to come to therapy and work on their worry. So it's my job to pull something out. It's my job to set it up in a way that makes it interesting for them. Rewarding, bribing. As I said, older kids sometimes understand the nature of this thing and they can see where it's going. And so then look, and then we've got the breathing skills. They're here, but they're down here. They're not the fulcrum, they're not the focus of this approach. So now when I show you these parenting patterns, this is going to all make sense to you now, because you've just listened to me for an hour and a half. Right? So these are the things that you want to make sure that you pay attention to, particularly if you tend to be a worrier. This is another book, picture from the Playing with Anxiety book. This person right here is very loosely based on my older sister. She has 4 kids. She's a worrier. She's created a few of them. I get the youngest one, who's 11 now, whose name is Greta. She will call me and she'll say, oh, I was really worried about something, and I don't think my mom handled it very well. Yeah. So here are some of the things that we see, right? Reassuring, all of these things now, as you read these things, there's nothing here that's going to be news to you. Pushing too hard, this last one, pushing too hard, becoming angry and explosive and punishing. This is going to happen. I've never known anybody to effectively punish a kid out of an anxiety disorder. Nonetheless, I know that anxiety is frustrating. I know that it exhausts you. So there are times when you're just going to, right? So here's a little strategy that you can use so that you can sort of get it out. You can have your nutty guilt-free, okay? Right. So let's just imagine you've got Joshua, he's 11, and he doesn't like when you go out at night. He likes things to be a certain way. He gets really freaked out if you're not home when it's time for him to go to bed because daddy doesn't do it right, blah, 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 blah. So you say to Joshua, I am going out to the movies with my friend Christine. I really want to go out to the movies with my friend Christine. And Joshua says, no, you can't go out to the movies. I'm going to stay up and you're going to get home and I'm going to be up. Right? Oh, and you just had it, right? You've had it with this worry. You've had it with this kid and you're so frustrated. Right? Now, if you say to him, listen, I'm tired of it, right? Then later you have to go back and you have to say, I'm so sorry, I know we're working on this together and I know this worry thing is tough and I didn't mean to lose my temper. Okay, here's what you do, right? You say, oh my gosh, Joshua, I am so frustrated by your worry right now. I bet you are too, right? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm taking it out of you right now. I'm just taking it, and you throw it over there, and you say, get over here, right? Right? I got to have a word with your worry. Listen, worry. I am tired of you bossing my son around and bossing me around. I am tired of you demanding that I stay at home, that you demand that he stays up late. You are so bossy. We are exhausted by this worry, aren't we, Joshua? Ooh, I just love so much. I just love him, right? And he's like, right? And you say, and I just won't stand for it anymore. I'm not going to let you do this to our family. I'm not going to let you be in charge. We've just got to take a stand against you. And you can prompt Joshua at that point. Joshua, tell your worry that you're tired of it. Whatever. And what you've done is now you've gotten rid of your frustration and your anger. You haven't directed it at your kid. You've modeled separating from the worry. You've modeled talking back to it, and your son or your daughter is right here with you. You guys are on the same team. Now, whether or not you ultimately get out to the movies, I don't know, but at least you don't have to go back and apologize and feel guilty that you got angry at your child and you know that you're not supposed to because you're trying to work on, blah, 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 blah. So go ahead and you can use that. You can use it on your spouse, too. So modeling with your own anxious behavior, right? Remember early on I said that one of the things that's fun is that if you know that you're a worrier, and if you go home and ask your kids if you're a worrier, they will tell you, when I'm with a family, I'll say, who's the most worried person in this family? And there's usually like, her, right? They zero in on it. And you name your own worry part. And make a deal with your kid that every time they catch you doing your catastrophic worry chatter, your safety chatter, that they put a marble in the jar, and when they get 10 marbles, then you have to order them pizza or something like that. So play, play, play. You want to have a sense of humor about this. You want to make it a family project. You want to be open about it and talk about it. Call it what it is. Use the language that really is helpful. So here's accommodations, right? So this is, as I said at the very beginning, those 504 accommodation plans. Anything you do that the worry says, thank you so much for the help. So changing schedules around. Now look, you can't just go home and sort of say, look, out of the bed, or from now on, right? You can't just pull the rug out from under them. They need to understand, they need to be invested in this. But you've got to be working towards something. An accommodation plan that is not skill-based is going to support anxiety. And there are very, very few. My friend Julie, who's a school psychologist and a good friend of mine, she just wrote an awesome 504 plan for that little twin. We work together. But most 504 plans, except for actually the ones that she writes, I feel as if the anxiety is invited to the 504 meeting and is telling everybody what to put on the plan and then high-fiving at the end because the anxiety got exactly what it wanted. So we really have to have skill-based. An example of a great 504 intervention would be that if the child is going to leave the classroom, there is somebody that they should go to, and it could be the school nurse, could be the guidance counselor, it could be the assistant principal, or anybody that they're close to, whoever their person is. And when they get there, That person has an index card that is a reminder the child is to say back to the worry. And they do a role play. And they pull out the skills. Right? Okay, so your worry showed up. What do you say back? What do we do when your worry shows up? And you go through that, and then back to the classroom they go. If you say, when you are worried and anxious, you can go to the library and hang out until you feel comfortable, the time that they spend in the library will get longer, and their ability to manage their anxiety will get less and less and less. The anxiety will be in charge. Has to be skill-based. When I work with schools, give the teachers the language. Everybody's talking the same language so that the child hears it from everybody. That's your worry. What are you going to say back to it? They get pissed off at times. You know, they'll say, like, that's not my worry. If I had $1 for every time that somebody said, that Lynn Lyons doesn't know what she's talking about. Sometimes in the car on the way home. Medication with no therapy or skill building. So I'm not anti-medication. I'm not. However, we know that medication alone is the least effective treatment for anxiety disorders. And in fact, when you look at OCD, for example, so Zoloft, used very frequently, approved for the use of OCD in kids. Put them on Zoloft, same thing happens with adults. No skill building, no cognitive behavioral therapy, the symptoms will diminish. You take them off the medication and those symptoms will come back as if the kid had never been on the medication. So we really want to focus on skill building. Cognitive behavioral therapy is much more effective long-term with obsessive compulsive disorder than medication is. The other problem with medications, in which I will stand strong on this, is benzodiazepines for kids. You give kids any long-term treatment or even sort of medium-term treatment. Benzodiazepines are your Ativan, your Klonopin, Valium, Xanax. Those medications work really well because they put the amygdala to sleep. And everything that I have just said has been that we are really trying to retrain the amygdala. So if we are using those medications, we're not teaching skills in a way that we are retraining the amygdala. So I don't believe in giving benzos to kids. You want to get on a plane and go to your cousin's wedding in Hawaii and you're afraid, you go ahead, you get your Xanax and you throw it back with your Bloody Mary. I'll help you if I'm sitting next to you on the plane, right? But long-term treatment, the use of benzos in kids, I don't get it, but there are still many on a regular basis, kids come to me and have a prescription for one of those kinds of medications. If you come to me and you're on a medication, I'm not going to say stop it. But if you come to me and you're not, and you haven't had good treatment, and the parents say, should we try medication? I say, can you give me 4 or 5 sessions? Can we work on this first and let's see? It shouldn't be the first line of treatment. I don't like it when kids go and get a prescription first and then get treatment later. And I know that sometimes the accessibility of treatment is difficult and all that jazz, but it's just not what we should be, how we should be conceiving of these things with kids. It's just not fair. And no kid should be told, you will have to be on this medication for the rest of your life. No kid should be told that. There is no research to back that up. Okay, so, right, if you're overprotective and indulgent, just some things to sort of, just some reminders. All of this is fairly straightforward. I tell parents all the time, you can think whatever you want, but on the outside, right, this is where breathing helps you, right? You can take your 10 deep breaths. Keep your face soggy, right? Just think about your reactions. Allow them to be uncomfortable. It's hard, but let them struggle a little bit. Let them fail. I say to parents all the time, your job is not to keep the train on the tracks. Your job is when the train goes off the tracks, that you have taught your child how to get the train back on the tracks. And our culture is so concerned with making sure that everything goes okay all the time. We need to let them be in it a little bit. We need to let them fail, let them lose, let them fall down. So it doesn't make sense to me when kids come to see me and they have been in treatment in the past, and I say to the parents, well, what did you guys work on as a family? Or if somebody comes to me for a consult and I say, so what do you do in the therapy? And the parent says, I don't know. What are the goals? I'm not sure. Do you have homework assignments? No, not really. Therapy with young kids should not go on behind closed doors with anxiety. There is such a high likelihood statistically that one or both of those parents also struggle with anxiety. They need information and they need support. Look at this study that they did. This is the percent of children with no diagnosis at the end of treatment, right? Anxiety treatment works. If you have to get something in my field, this is what you want. If you have to get something, anxiety is what you want. It is so darn treatable. Okay, so if there's no parental anxiety and we do treatment with the kid, that stands for cognitive behavioral therapy, we do it with the kid, we get an 82% success rate. We have the parent learn some anxiety management techniques and it's about the same because the parent really doesn't have a lot of anxiety. But look what happens when we add parental anxiety to this. Come on. Oh, sorry. So twitchy. When we add parental anxiety, so here we've got a parent with anxiety, we're doing treatment with the child alone, but we're not including the parent. Here is when we include the parent in the treatment. I don't like this number. 39%, we cut the success rate in half when we don't include the parents in the treatment. That makes no sense to me. No sense to me. You as parents, if you are a worrier, you can learn how to do things differently. You can make some changes in the way that you talk, the way you react. You can be such an effective coach for your child. Somebody's got to teach you how to do that. To have a 7.5-year-old behind a closed door with a therapist. 7.5-year-olds don't get out of a therapy session and in the car on the way home say, oh my gosh, I did such a great cognitive restructuring exercise with Lynn. So fabulous, I'll tell you all about it. Parents need support. They need to know what to do, what to say, and how to break this pattern. This is a generational pattern, and it can be stopped. I do it all the time. It's so gratifying. It's hard work, but it's not complicated. So the last thing that we're looking for, non-anxious parent. So if you have a non-anxious parent, if there is a partnership that you're in, and one of the parents is anxious and one of the parent is not. And if one of you is here, here's your moment. You're right. What happens is the non-anxious parent gets marginalized really quickly, and this is how it happens. So the non-anxious parent says, I think she can go stop by herself. She's 11 years old. There are other girls at the bus stop. We live in a safe area. I think we should let her go down by herself. And the anxious parent says, okay, fine. So if she gets kidnapped, you can call my mother and tell my mother that our daughter is missing. So if that's okay with you, go right ahead. And the non-anxious parent says, I don't want any part of that. So they back out of it. The anxiety in the anxious parent is far more dominating. So we need that non-anxious parent because that non-anxious parent has some skills that need to be validated and need to be supportive. The other thing that happens is that they get farther and farther apart. The anxious parent doesn't like the risky behavior of the non-anxious parent, so he gets more anxious and controlling. And then the non-anxious parent, because they don't like how controlling, that when this parent is gone, then they get more risky. So you've got one parent that's getting really controlling because she can't trust or he can't trust the other one, and the other one's getting annoyed, so he's getting more and more risky. So the anxious parent doesn't let them out of the house alone, and then the non-anxious parent is taking them skydiving. Right, so yeah. And that causes trouble in marriages. Once we get that non-anxious parent in there and they start working together and using the same language, we can really make some strides very quickly. So ultimately what we're looking for is autonomy. We're looking for kids to feel like they are capable of solving problems, like they're capable of managing things, that not everything is going to go right, but they know what to do. And so, earlier I said that tolerating uncertainty, not so good. Independent problem solving, not so good. They score low on autonomy scales. We want to support their independence. There are lots of statistics about kids that have anxiety growing up with no treatment. The likelihood of them moving out of the house gets less and less the longer the anxiety goes on. I have said to parents, look, you can spend the money on therapy now, or you can take the money and redo your basement, because he's not going anywhere. Some people think that's funny. So this is all pretty straightforward, right? We want independent thinking, we want problem solving, we want them to figure things out for themselves, we want to let them make their own decisions about things. There is one thing here, this one right here. So this was a study, this was in the mainstream press for about 5 minutes when it came out a few years ago. But kids that are allowed to negotiate, to argue, to respectfully disagree with their parents at home do better with their peers when it comes to handling issues of sex and drugs. They're used to that no voice. So the other quality we know that anxious kids come from overprotective parents. There's another kind of parent that also creates anxious kids, and that's the my way or the highway parent. That's the dominating, controlling parent, because you don't get a chance to sort of figure things out on your own, and you're very worried about making mistakes. So the more that you let your kids negotiate, doesn't mean they win all the time, but or much of the time, but let them talk about what they think is wrong. Let them negotiate the rules with you. Let them disagree with their teachers at school. Instead of saying, look, it's a rule, you follow the rule because it's a rule. Give them the opportunity, and they'll do better when it comes to decision making with their peers. Yeah, so I said that. Doop. Okay, so I'm going to end. I don't know if you guys, this video went viral and some of you may have seen it, but this is a good example of autonomy. This is what we're shooting for. So she's saying, worry about yourself. So I'll stick around for a little bit as I'm cleaning up and ask questions. What I can't do tonight here is a clinical consult with your child. But if you have sort of general questions, I'll be out front. My husband will be out there. He's got the books. There's a DVD out there too. And he always reminds me, tell them about the DVD, because they all ask me. That's me. It's, so anyway, we're going to end with worry about yourself.
Worry about yourself. Worry about yourself.
Can I help?
No. I'll help. I don't. You can help when we're out to eat, okay? You can help when we are out to eat. Do you have booster seats?
Probably. You want me to help, Rose?
No. Thank you. No, thank you.
What do you want me to do?
Worry about yourself. Worry about yourself. I'll do this one, so gonna do that. You drive! Worry about yourself. Go drive! Go!
So she's going to be okay, that one. Yeah, worry about yourself. So I hope that this was helpful to you. Thank you for coming out on a cold and frozen night. I encourage you, I know I threw a lot of information at you in 2 hours. It's certainly, I could talk to you for 12 hours about this. I could talk to you for 6 hours about this. 2 hours is a nice amount of time, but I'm trying to give you an overview. I want you to really realize that this is not complicated and that the things that you do really make a difference. If you just take a few of these ideas and tips, if you just pay attention to your safety chatter, to your catastrophic language, if you just talk to your worry and model that for your kids, and not get all sucked into the content, you can make a difference in this. It is so important that kids feel like they can manage things without us stepping in. We're not doing so good with that. Our cohort, our generation, we are the highest group of anxiety and depression sufferers right now. The fastest growing group are the 17 to 24-year-olds. They're right on our heels. So I encourage you and invite you to be playful with this. It loves to be taken seriously. It's a serious issue, but it withers with a sense of humor. Jay Haley, who was this great family psychologist, said that we should be serious about what our patients are suffering with, but we should approach it in a spirit of play. And so I hope that that has come across in the way that I deal with kids. I'm here, I'll answer questions as I'm sort of getting ready. Crawford and I have to drive home, and we have, well, one of my sons, I sent him to London on Friday. I've gotten one text from him. The subject heading was bank, and it said, is it okay to use the debit card? And that was on Friday, and I haven't heard a word from him since. So I'm assuming the debit card is working okay. So thank you so much for listening. Email if you want the slides. Email me.